the way it has gone. And it seems to me that now, well, I think it's fair to say that I responded to this.
At 58, Spencer Tracy understood the price of silence. Fame had found him early. It never left his side. Yet behind the applause, he hid a love deemed forbidden. Public morality clauses ruled the town. Studio men measured virtue like box office returns. One wrong whisper could end a career overnight. Tracy felt those whispers circling his name. He carried a forbidden love to the grave in silence. Friends noticed the strain in his eyes. The church, the press, the studios, all watched. He learned to speak softly and live cautiously. But every secret has an origin, and his began far from Hollywood lights. Spencer Bonaventure Tracy was born in Milwaukee in 1900. His parents were Irish-American and proudly Catholic. The family prized discipline, humor, and faith. Money was often tight, but expectations stayed high. He attended Catholic schools and learned to argue his case. He loved the parish pageants, the hymns, the ritual. A stage felt safe even then. Milwaukee offered new technologies and old customs. Streetcars rattled past breweries and church steeples. Ragtime spilled from saloons. Nickelodeons showed flickering dreams on cold afternoons. Tracy and a neighborhood friend, reportedly Pat O'Brien, devoured matinees. They copied voices and gestures in the street. Performance became a private language between boys. War interrupted the routine. In 1918, he enlisted in the Navy as a teenager. The armistice arrived before he saw combat. He returned home, restless and searching. College followed at Ripon, where he found the campus stage. Classmates remembered a serious student who could turn suddenly hilarious. The applause pulled him forward. So did curiosity. What else could he do with that voice? New York called. Tracy reportedly shared cheap rooms and cheaper meals with other hopefuls. He trained at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. The city roared with jazz, vaudeville, and dazzling Broadway lights. Yet respectability still ruled. The newspapers adored morality tales. The police raided speakeasies. Laws police desire and punish difference. In the theater world, coded signals did the talking. People learned to protect themselves with silence. By the late 1920s, Tracy found steady work in stock companies. He toured small towns by train, learning stamina and craft. Each night was a lesson in timing and truth. He married Louise Treadwell and tried to balance ambition and duty. The country changed around them. Prohibition engineered secrecy. The studios in California promised money, but also control. Newspapers grew sharper, hungrier, and more intrusive. Then a stark prison drama on Broadway changed everything. The reviews were electric. Hollywood executives sat in the audience and took notes. A screen test followed. The boy from Milwaukee was about to learn the rules of a gilded factory. He packed his caution with his clothes and headed west. Fox signed him first. The contract felt like rescue and trap. Publicity men praised his rugged face and quiet authority. They promised prestige, then handed him programmers and quick schedules. He learned the camera with speed and stubborn focus. Directors valued his listening. He could say everything with a glance. John Ford remembered him from Broadway. Up the River put Tracy on screens with Humphrey Bogart. The film was lively, wisecracking, and fast. Reviews noticed Tracy's gravity. They called him authentic. They said he acted without acting. Yet Fox still misused him in uneven parts. He kept showing up prepared. He tried not to complain. Irving Thalberg at MGM watched closely. He saw a star hiding in plain sight. In 1935, Tracy moved to the Lion's Den. The studio machine swallowed him whole and polished him bright. Fritz Lang's fury gave him moral fire and torment. Crowds leaned forward when his eyes darkened. Then San Francisco paired him with Clark Gable and an earthquake. Theaters shook, and the box office roared. Tracy held his own beside glamour and spectacle. Studio chiefs smiled like kings counting coins. Captains courageous changed everything. Tracy played a tender fisherman with bruised hands. He softened his voice, then hardened it at the end. Audiences cried. Critics stood and applauded. He won the Academy Award. The next year, he won again for Boys Town. 2 statues in 2 years turned discipline into legend. Fan magazines crowned him the conscience of the lot. Letters arrived by the sack. Mothers praised his decency. Priests quoted his roles in sermons. The studio framed him as a model husband and Catholic gentleman. Photographers staged backyard barbecues and church steps. The myth felt heavy, even then. Inside MGM, the code enforced order. Scripts passed censors before cameras rolled. Morality clauses ruled contracts with iron precision. Advisors scouted nightclubs before stars arrived. Pals were cleared. Drinks were counted. Gossip columnists lingered beside the commissary, hungry for slips. Tracy learned the rules. Work, charm the press, protect the image. Everything else stayed after hours, behind locked doors. Directors loved his honesty. Crews trusted his steadiness. Fellow actors reached for that same still center. Stardom deepened, but privacy narrowed. Fame brightened the room and darkened the corners. In those corners, a different life waited. It asked for tenderness, discretion, and 1,000 careful exits. The studio sold Spencer Tracy as unshakable and upright. Real life was gentler, sadder, and complicated. He remained married to Louise Treadwell, though they lived apart for long stretches. In the late 1930s, he met Katharine Hepburn on set. Their bond deepened quickly. They protected each other's work and privacy. They used separate houses, separate cars, separate entrances. They were careful with schedules and doorways. Their partnership became Hollywood's most famous open secret. Yet the city held other secrets too. Directors like George Cukor hosted refined Sunday gatherings. The guest list mixed writers, designers, and discreet performers. Conversation flowed. So did trust. Men who loved men found room to breathe there. They traded coded jokes and safer glances. Tracy moved in and out of those creative circles. He respected Cukor's artistry and kindness. Biographers note that he kept confidences without comment. He learned the art of arriving late and leaving earlier. Whisper networks said more than newspapers ever would. Some contemporaries recalled Tracy's comfort among men who hid the same fear. A few later writers suggested private attachments beyond Hepburn. The evidence remains fragmentary and debated. Studio handlers erased trails before they formed. Schedules shifted. Witnesses forgot. What survives are patterns. A fondness for certain houses in the hills. Careful nights at the Garden of Allah. Quiet weekends near Lake Arrowhead with hand-picked friends. When risk rose, trips were canceled. When safety returned, the circle resumed. Morality clauses hung over everything. The language was cold and final. Any conduct that brought ridicule or scandal meant dismissal. Investigators followed column tips and clergy whispers. The Vice Squad raided downtown rooms. Confidential magazine paid for rumors and punished truth with innuendo. Tracy knew the costs of a single exposed night. He sought tenderness, but also durability. Hepburn offered both. She became his anchor and shield. She understood the pressure and shared the silence. Coded habits multiplied. Phone calls became brief and bland. "Are we still on for tennis?" could mean something else. Drivers learned detours through side gates and service alleys. Hotel clerks memorized false names that sounded ordinary. Beach houses kept a spare bedroom that stayed unused. Public dinners lasted exactly the length of a newsman's patience. Private conversations began only after windows were checked twice. The strain showed in his drinking. Colleagues saw the pattern and worried. Guilt pressed from faith and family. Fear pressed from contracts and headlines. Desire pressed from loneliness. The three collided in the dark hours before dawn. By the 1940s, he walked a tightrope over an open boulevard. A single gust could send him into the floodlights. Then, the gust arrived. A rumor sharpened into a column threat. Confidential wanted a name, a date, a picture, and a payoff. The studio called. "Protect the image," they said. "Choose what must be saved." The phone calls grew tense and short. A columnist hinted at a scandal. Confidential circled with checks and sharpened pencils. Studio lawyers gathered in paneled rooms and spoke in codes. Protect the brand. Protect the parish image. Protect the box office. Spokesmen rehearsed answers that sounded warm and empty. The plan was simple. Freeze time. until the danger passed. Work became negotiation. Publicists arranged decoy dinners and careful photographs. Reporters received favors. A cover story appeared about exhaustion and prayer. Release schedules shuffled to place comic relief before moral drama. The studio trimmed dialogue that cut too close to home. A late-night scene disappeared in a new draft. Everyone nodded, as if art, not fear, guided the change. Tracy felt the vice. He slept poorly and drank more. Friends knocked at locked doors and waited in hallways. He kept the curtains closed even at noon. His hands shook during table reads. Directors slowed the pace to help him. Insurance men raised new conditions. A film paused while doctors checked his blood and heart. He hated the medical forms most. They asked questions in cold rows that left no room for shame. The church weighed on him. Old teachings met a modern storm. Confession offered comfort, then sharpened regret. He loved two worlds that did not love each other back. Biographers note that he spoke of sin and duty in the same breath. He asked for mercy from a life that demanded certainty. Hepburn urged rest and stillness. She kept watch by the door, patient and fierce. She could guard a room, but not a mind. Rumors faded, then returned. A driver talked. A clerk boasted in a bar. A private letter strayed into the wrong hands. The studio wrote checks and called in debts. A promised role slipped to another actor with a cleaner narrative. A magazine profile praised Tracy's moral portrayals, then asked sly questions. The applause stayed loud, but the air felt thinner each night. By the mid-1950s, he looked older than his years. He carried fatigue in his shoulders and sorrow in his jaw. He finished a picture on willpower and silence. The premiere lights glowed cold. He left early, past cameras that did not blink. He needed a different path, or at least a softer one. Somewhere beyond headlines, a smaller life might still be possible. He stepped back without announcing it. Fewer press lunches, fewer openings. He chose scripts that asked for compassion and argument. Inherit the Wind gave him a bruised idealist with a stubborn heart. Judgment at Nuremberg asked for patience and moral weight. He held silence like a tool, then cut with a single line. Audiences trusted him. They leaned into his pauses and breathed with him. Work brought steadiness, but his body rebelled. Doctors warned about blood sugar and fatigue. He nodded and returned to set. He hid the tremor with discipline. He hid the exhaustion with timing. A friendly crew adjusted call times. Directors tightened days. Old friends visited between takes and told gentle jokes. He smiled, then closed his eyes. Home shifted between two addresses. He remained legally married to Louise, respectful and loyal in quiet ways. He visited their son and offered steady love. He supported the clinic that bore John's name. Letters from families arrived by the bundle. They thanked him for the help, the honesty, the example. He answered when he could, and sent donations when he could not. With Hepburn, he found a haven, a small kitchen, a radio playing softly. Walks timed to dusk when the hills felt empty. They shared pages and marked them with pencils. They argued about cadence and breath. They cooked simple meals and ate late. She guarded the phone and the door. He guarded the calm they made together. The city changed around them. The production code loosened. Magazines experimented with candor. New stars pushed against the old walls. Civil rights marches shook studio gates. A different courage filled the boulevards. He watched with interest and caution. He admired the honesty but felt the drag of habit. Younger actors lived more openly, at least a little. He measured gain against risk and kept his boundary. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner brought his last burst of light. The set felt like a reunion and a goodbye. He moved carefully, spoke carefully, and saved strength for the close-ups. When the day ended, he sat with Hepburn and held her hand. The world tugged at fame. He chose tenderness. In that choice, his life finally made sense. He never delivered a manifesto. He delivered presence. On screen, he spoke for conscience. Off screen, he protected a fragile peace. He knew love could not live in headlines. He also knew love could not live without shelter. So he built rooms within rooms and kept watch. Hepburn stood at his side, a harbor and a wall. Louise remained in his life with dignity and care. Between them stood duty, faith, and the rules of a frightened age. The price of his image was silence. The reward was work that still moves us. He carried a forbidden love to the grave, and he carried it gently. That is not defeat. That is survival inside a system that demanded masks. We can read the caution in his eyes and still feel the warmth. We can honor the small rooms where tenderness outlasted fear. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. What should we explore next from old Hollywood's hidden history? Subscribe for more true stories of courage, secrecy, and survival. Your comments help guide the next chapter, and your voice keeps these memories alive.